has been a violent week across the country, and many fear that race relations and police relations with communities are falling apart. Earlier this week, 2 black men were shot and killed by police, and then a peaceful protest turned deadly in Dallas when Micha Johnson opened fire in an attempt to kill as many white officers as possible. Since that first shooting in Louisiana, there have been dozens of protests across the country. Here in Houston, Mayor Sylvester Turner is calling for the end of the us versus them mentality. The question now is, how do we improve community relations between police and minorities, and also between people of different races? That's our topic this half hour. We want to hear from you on our Fox 26 Facebook page. You can also weigh in on Twitter using the hashtag Fox26forlife. Joining us in our newsroom, we have our senior legal analyst, Chris Tritico. We also have Jerry Bernberg. He is the former chair of the Harris County Democratic Party. And we have Republican strategist and public policy analyst Jackie Bally. All right, this has certainly been a strained relationship for a while. It didn't just happen overnight, right?
This has been a long week, but it's been building for a couple of years now, and something we've been talking about, Sally, on the show here more than once over the last couple of years with police shootings all over the country. And the country getting involved in more than one protest over the last couple of years. And Jackie, we've talked about this before. What's the answer to turning the topic from us versus them and protest and violence to how do we solve the problem? How do we change the rhetoric?
If you look at Mayor Turner's response to the Dallas shootings, I think it was perfect. It's the kind of response you want to hear from a leader. He denounced the actions. He said it was despicable. Despicable is actually the words that the president used, but he said something equivalent to that. He also said that he was supporting the police, and he was asking all of his residents and citizens to support the police 100%. And he quickly gathered faith-based leaders to pray for police officers the next day. And then he also started talking to other council members about community policing. Those are the kind of steps that you want to see from a leader of your city, because whenever there's turmoil, people are anxious, you want to have your leader say, look, this is wrong, we denounce it, and we're going to stand behind these police officers who wake up every morning to protect strangers.
And I agree with that, Jerry, and I also thought that the Dallas mayor did a great job. But those speeches end, and the next day we still have a divided community that is still talking in rhetoric that's not coming together.
Well, but perhaps just a little less divided. I think one of this whole concept, for example, of community-oriented policing, when did that get started in Houston? That was under the Lee Brown administration, and not under the Lee Brown mayor administration. That's when he was police chief.
Right.
We've been working on that in Houston for decades at this point in time. In Dallas, they've been working on it for at least 6 or 7 years, or perhaps more. The point being that there is no silver bullet. Boy, that was a bad choice of terms. Yeah. There is really no way to fix the problem overnight. It's got to be worked on, it's got to be developed, and anybody who thinks that either Jackie, I, or you in about 40 seconds can come up with, oh, well, here's the solution, is delusional.
Well, then why do we bring you in here? Let me go to Sally. She's monitored our social media.
Hey, good point. Why do we bring you in here? No, I'm just kidding, guys. Okay, let's head over to our Facebook page, where obviously there are very strong reactions all week to the stories that have happened across our country. John Molina says, when everyone thinks to save a life and not take a life, this world will get better. It will never happen if the first thing we do is resort to violence, when the first thing we think of is kill the other person first. And then Christine says, first let me say I have stepchildren in law enforcement. I was devastated about the shooting. I just wish officers, news stations, and citizens alike would all speak out more when corrupt officers do kill citizens. We must pray for our nation. And a lot of what we're hearing too on social media is that a lot of people say, hey, I support law enforcement. I support Black Lives Matter too. You can support both, right?
Well, thank you, because the Black Lives Matter movement, let's talk about Dallas for a minute. that protest was not a protest designed for violence. It was specifically designed for a nonviolent protest. The idiot that showed up and started the violence had nothing to do with the protest. And you can see before the violence started, officers taking pictures with the people that were there protesting. And so that violence had nothing to do with the protest. And so to turn that protest into what it wasn't is wrong, and to attack the police officers who were there as violent officers is wrong, and that changes the message to something it shouldn't be.
I personally do not support the Black Lives Matter movement. I've said that before because I've seen a change the last couple of years in the rhetoric, and I personally do not agree with a lot of the things coming out of the webpage, of the website. Their leader, Mr. Hood, who was the leader at the Dallas meeting, I don't like some of the things that he says on his social media site. There's a lot of racial undertones and a lot of racial rhetoric that I just don't condone. With that said, a lot of the people at that Dallas meeting, they wanted to peacefully protest. Peacefully, a lot of them did. And this one gentleman who was an extremist decided to use their movement and turn it into something violent. I don't think that's fair to them.
Right.
And then to turn it into the police officers who were there to protect residents from to have a peaceful process, to let them protest against them, that was definitely not at the fault of a majority of the people who were there.
Jerry?
First of all, I do not regard him as a gentleman. That said, I think that what we have to do is to concentrate on the positive, as the president tried to do, by the way, in his remarks yesterday, and understand we are healing, but healing is a process which takes time, which takes deliberation. And I hope in another segment we have an opportunity to talk about what was the role of guns in this whole situation.
And we're going to try to get to that, because we're going to stay with this the entire show today. And coming up in the next 20 minutes, we're going to talk about Councilman Dwight Boykins and his suggestion on the way to modify policing. And we'll be back in about 15 minutes.